So thank you to all to join us today on this webinar from the CFM. Every time we present a different program, today we will focus on how to start reducing GHG emissions in community buildings. So my name is Emma Kirk, and I'm accompanied by Jonathan DeLuca and Emile Malo. We are all three members of the community building retrofit initiative. Emily Marlou is with us today also. So we will begin this meeting by the meeting will be done on the indigenous territory since millennials. Today, they've been the custodian of this land called Canada. We recognize Anishinaabe Algonquin as being the traditional custodians on which the FCM offices are located. And we appreciate the historical value of this area. Also the contribution of the Inuit, Métis, and other indigenous peoples, and who have been on this land throughout. And please recognize the historical role of the indigenous people, and to favor reconciliation regardless of where we are located today. So we encourage you to add the location in which you are situated today before we start the webinar. Before delving into the topics, our webinar will be in French with simultaneous interpretation into English. Pour utiliser,
it's a little slow and select the English option. Au fur et à mesure que nous avançons de notre présentation,
throughout the presentation, I'll ask you, you can ask your questions in the chat box. We will answer these questions at the end of this session. There will be a Q&A. You can ask your questions with the chat box in the language of your choice. We will take a look at the chat box throughout the presentation. So if you have any considerations or questions, this is the plan throughout the presentation. Jonathan DeLuca and Emily will share the presentation. I'd like to give the microphone to Emily at this point. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be. I'm at home. I'm curious to know what time it is where you are. If you could change, Emma, you'll see we've got a beautiful, nice agenda for you today. A lot of content, because when we start talking about net zero regarding buildings, we could spend the entire day talking about this. So as Emma said, so please use the Q&A if we don't have the opportunity to answer all of your questions during the webinar, to get back to you afterwards. So perhaps to introduce the topic today, and those who are not as familiar with the Green Municipal Fund, it is the biggest program of the FCM, almost $2 billion invested to support sustainable projects throughout the country. So what you see on the screen, the 5 sectors in which we invest: energy, management, waste, territory, transport, and water management. And you will see some 60 programs to support the municipalities at every stage. And today you will see that we will update our programs to come up with a strategy that's more concerted and focused on net zero. So you'll be able to see a series of options regarding the funding and the programs, a program that was announced in the springtime for climate change adaptation. So this is a something that we will have to explore later on. So what we will allude to today is also is a program that won't change. This is our program, the renovation of community building retrofit. So we want to explore this question. What are the opportunities? How can we save with, by making retrofits in our existing community buildings to have some to increase the services to the population and reducing GHG? And also, can we reduce the energy used by these buildings and how we can support you with the resources, with training and funding to do this work? So we are, so in 1 hour, we will not be able to cover all the topics, but we want to encourage you to use our services. Next one, please. So just to set how many of you in your municipality has a community building that should be a retrofit, that should be renovated? You should see your survey with your options. So you've got several of these options. Perhaps you don't have such a building, but you know that very soon there will be such a building. So you can indicate your answer. And Emma, when you will feel that we've got a sufficient number of answers, you can give us an idea of what these answers look like. A few more seconds to end with the results. I have no results on my screen. Perhaps I'm still seeing a 0%. Let us know if you received the survey. Technical difficulties. We have the technical problem, it seems, so we cannot show the results. So you can just go ahead. Well, I'll take for granted that you all have such a building. Would be ready to wage, because in my work, I discuss with matters with municipalities. It's very seldom don't we have an indoor rink, a pool, community center that needs TLC, that needs a renovation. So that's why we created the program, the CDR, and Jonathan will allude to this more in detail. Thank you, Emily. I'm happy to be with you today. So it is in the GMF's Community Buildings Retrofit, a program of $167 million to optimize the energy performance of community buildings and reduce GHG emissions, and most notably the community buildings, and to reduce the operation cost. This is a program destined for municipalities, but also to their partners. So all the non-for-profit organizations and regional or indigenous communities, amongst others, all the municipalities are eligible to this program, with the exception of the cities that are part of the cities that are like Montreal and other, and the suburbs. There are participants today who work at the City of Montreal. We can talk to you afterwards, since to see what you might avail yourself of in this program, the scope of this program. So when we're talking about a community buildings, we talk about an enclosed building. We offer program and services, sportive, educational, or community cultural events, and also that the public usually has access. So we're talking about indoor ice rinks, sport arenas, libraries, art and culture facilities. We have chosen to look at the community buildings in this program because they are at the heart of our municipalities. You know very well these buildings offer services that they are important to the citizens and that need very often specific or special attention. So up let's see if the survey works this time. The community buildings are responsible of what proportion of energy consumption in the municipal portfolio. So you've got you can test this now to see. So the three choices are 17, 25, and 37% of the energy consumption. There should have been some background music in the meantime. All right. So we've got it's people that think it's 25% and 37%. We got a tie. The answer 37% is the answer. So as you can see in this slide, 37% is more than a third of the energy consumption of municipal buildings altogether. So the indoor ice rinks, so some 20% or community and recreation centers, 17%. What's clear is that the cost and of upkeep of these buildings is very high, and it is even greater because they don't function optimally, and they're an important source of GHGs because of certain equipment that use combustible fuels. As you can see on this graphic, according to the infrastructure, 1 out of 3 is in the very bad state and state of disrepair or passable state. Concretely, is that there are a great number of community facilities that need to be retrofit or upgraded, and we know that they will need intervention in the short term or in medium term. So it's a difficult situation because you know that we were asking the municipal administrations to do more with fewer resources, and we're aware of the budgetary constraints limit the options available to the municipalities. So it makes the decision extremely difficult. Another reason to focus on community buildings is that the type of improvements to reduce the GHGs and to save money can be associated to upgrades that are already planned and also upkeep that should be done perhaps differently. So we're talking we're talking about not necessarily changing the way municipalities operate these buildings and to maximize the investment in these buildings. So to undertake such a pathway can contribute to several municipal goals and the realization of climate in municipality to reduce the operational costs and to uh, cater to the management needs. And so a comprehensive GHG reduction program for community building can support many municipal priorities that you will find in the accompanying document. The link will be in the chat, and all the information can also be consulted in the document that will be posted in the chat. Next one, please. So to help the municipalities to pave the pathway to reduce your building's operating costs, we've elaborated a strategy in 4 stages with a different offer of funding. The first one is to understand, to give you the tool to understand your building's performance. The second is to optimize your existing building systems. We don't replace anything, but we use what we already have to its full potential. Thirdly, to study long-term retrofit options and renovations, and finally, to invest, to put in place, implement capital upgrades that will have an environmental impact and energy reductions. So we will look at each of these stages individually by the first one, which is to understand your building's performance. Next one. So to understand the performance, you need to be able to understand your building's energy use. You need solid data, and so the building monitoring and analysis is of the utmost importance. Of course, the monitoring to understand the consumption of energy and how it evolves through time, and also compare it to that of similar buildings within the municipality or in other comparable municipalities. All this involves a system of a energetic study that identify the cost-saving measures and to analyze and monitor the consumption of energy, to track the performance, the type of heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and the pumps and the meters. You can assess the data in real time to modify the systems depending on the demand and the level of occupation, and to be able to pinpoint the opportunities of improving the energy performance of all this equipment in order to save money and to have a better environmental impact. So an important element in this analysis is to create a list of such buildings. So by order priority, so that list will help you to concentrate on the buildings in which you've got the most to gain as far as reduction of energy and also reduction of GHGs. And you have to you need data that can the cost, the savings, and the emissions of GHGs and the reductions, and that's the reason for which the Green Municipal Fund has put in subsidies to to do this monitor and analysis of the energy consumption. There's more information about this. There will be another short survey. So, do you monitor and analyze your building's energy consumption? So here it is. Yes, for all your buildings. Yes, for some of your buildings, or a just plain no, not at all. I'll give you a bit more time. All right, we see that it's pretty much split one third, one third, one third. So Emily will take over for to allude to this specific project. It's interesting, the results. What we see is that it's a common practice. There's more work to be done to make sure that it's done throughout. So what I will do in the next phases of the presentation to offer you a glimpse of the funding that's available to help you to put in place the suggestions that we're making regarding this program. So for each of the stages that you see on the diagram, a few basic elements. So I won't talk about the paperwork, the criteria, the forms, etc. But I'll invite you not to hesitate to communicate with me. You'll have my email address. That's my role to help you out in this process. And other elements that are more specific on this initiative is that it is the only program of municipal funds where the municipalities are limited to one request by category. You'll see in the presentations that we invite you to submit a project with several buildings to be able to avail yourselves of the best chance in each of the category, the four stages we will present. So from the moment that you have one building that is of a community nature, you can include buildings that are not of such location. So we're focusing on community buildings today, but you can broach it with a larger number. The same work can be done on an admin building, and the funding can help you somehow. So I'm coming back to this stage, which is the building monitoring and analysis to support you to set up this system. It is a subsidy that can cover up to 80% of the eligible costs to analyze the data up to a maximum of $25,000. So the goal is to obtain the information to for better planning, and also to Jonathan will take over with the next phases, the next stages. Thank you, Emily. So the next one in the pathway to reduce your building's operating costs and GHG emissions, it is to optimize your existing building systems so that these buildings work as efficiently as possible, energy-wise. So the recommissioning of building recommissioning is one of the most economical ways to reduce use of energy, and it can assess how existing equipment and systems are operating. The concept is that you look at what output you're getting from the existing equipment and to identify simple ways to improve and maintain performance. Most of them are low-cost initiatives, address issues and implement low-cost fixes. So we're talking about to do of a tune-up of the systems already in place to look how we use the equipment and to see if there are changes in the habits of the users, which would improve the 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 easiest way is to look at the parameters of lighting or air conditioning, air exchange. We've talked about we've talked about air quality and for several municipalities. So ventilation has led to additional expenses. So the recommissioning can lower the impact of this increase by optimizing your systems. Next one. One thing that's really important is the team in place. So the team that you will choose to help to conceive and to deploy the implementation, according to our experience with the municipalities, it is the determining factor with a project that is crowned with success or a project that ends in a cul-de-sac by identifying potential members of an interdepartmental team responsible for GHG reduction in community buildings. With a diversified team, you can pinpoint the problems and foresee these problems when you will implement the solutions. Next one. We've got a question for you once again. So according to you, so recommissioning can improve the energy efficiency of the entire building by up to which percentage? Give us your best guess. Are we talking about 5, 10, or 15% improvement in energy efficiency? Wow. Now we've got much more determined. I feel like saying you're all right. I see that a lot of you think that you can go up to 15% with the recommissioning. We're between 5 and 10. We have we can see a reduction within 3 years. These are not very expensive measures to undertake. So as far as the funding, we offer once again a subsidy to cover up to 60% of eligible costs. The existing building commissioning, we're not changing the equipment. That's the key. That's the common denominator. We improve the use. So we've got an amount of up to 55,000 for a single or multiple buildings, but we expect to see improvements in the consumption between 5 and 15%. You see, it's coherent. Of course, our program is structured. Each stage follows a logical steps to lead you to the best options. You can come and see us for whatever your need might be to have the best recommissioning. So you can collect the data and analysis. You can see us just for a subsidy for recommissioning. Back to you, Jonathan. So the third strategy that I'd like to explore with you is to study the long-term retrofit options. By identifying the options and questioning yourself, the best time to implement them in the future, long-term with a long-term approach. So, long-term planning for GHG reductions, it allows you to integrate energy and GHG reductions into longer-term planning for management of buildings. And also, these are capital projects, short, medium, and long-term goals, and to extend the asset life and reduce cost of ownership. The idea to plan long-term is to be able to determine a sequence of upgrades to achieve deep GHG reductions over time, and the most opportune time to implement them to guarantee not only their reduction, but also the optimization of the other financial advantages, the funding. Yeah. So we stray away from repairing only when absolutely necessary, and we determine instead a sequence of progressive upgrade coherent with the equipment in place that makes sense financially and that will get us closer to net zero emission. So this comprises carrying out a feasibility study, is short and medium term. A feasibility study examines a number of buildings or a unique one and the gains of efficiency, the scenarios that can be undertaken in which delay and with which financial involvement between them. Next one. This is an example of what such planning could look like that would come out of the feasibility study. Each stage comprises several measures to improve the performance of the building by starting by very non-expensive lighting, low flow fixtures, and in the following stages, you can bring modifications to the envelope of the building, the heat recovery systems, equipment replacements, and renewables to tackle several problems and reduce emissions at the same time. And this is only one example because your feasibility study will reflect your proper constraints and what are the steps that should be undertaken. And back to Emily. Obviously, this type of feasibility study, this is very useful. It's a management of the assets. So the municipalities, so it's very useful, but it's very difficult to integrate in the municipal budget because these are studies that can be very costly, and we know there are a lot of priorities. So since we're used to not having access to this tool, the cost can become a huge barrier. That's why we offer, once again, a subsidy that is quite substantial that will cover up to 80% of eligible costs. The total amount, if there are several buildings, a portfolio, 200,000 with a up to 65,000 per building. So what we like to see is that you put in place what we recommend through the study, measures that will allow you to reduce 50% reduction in GHG within 10 years and 80% reduction within 20 years. That's very coherent with the goals, more political goals that several municipal administrations have set for themselves. And this is something that you can adapt to your own specific needs. This is our basic criteria. But if you want a scenario that's much more aggressive, your municipality, for instance, wants to become net zero between now and 2030, you could do it with this study. So you could include buildings that are not community buildings. If it's a plan over 20 years, certain elements will change, but the orientation will have been realized to do the work. So it's a great subsidy that can go up to $200,000 to realize this study. Thank you, Emily. Now, the last stage is to go ahead to implement capital upgrades to make the buildings more efficient and to reduce your operation costs dramatically. Next one. The idea at this point of the process to understand and optimize the results. There is the complete measure, take action to follow the planned GHG reduction pathway and complete the measures over time or as a comprehensive retrofit project to meet targets. So the last stage is to go ahead with retrofit problems or renovation. They can be done over a short period of time or over time, over several years in certain cases. Next one. Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan. So I was saying at the beginning that the Green Municipal Fund, we support projects throughout the country. We want to do it for all stages because we're aware that especially the infrastructure, the municipalities have a lot of pressure to a lot of investments, but not necessarily the funding backbone to go ahead and do this. So the modernization and the integration of the goals linked to net zero, we support the capital projects with a combination of loan and grant, which is great. This is the most generous program. We've got 25% grant and 75% in the form of a loan with a preferential rate. What does that mean? That's the question I'm always asked. What does it mean? What I invite you to take into consideration is that our goal is to generate economies. So we'll want to offer you than what you could find if you borrow the traditional way. So we can cover up to 80% of eligible costs of what we can cover 25% grant, 75% for a total maximum of $5 million. So you have two options. There are two ways to do this. You must choose one because we limit the municipalities in this budgetary envelope to one project by category. So one project, a capital project, can be for several buildings. So a short-term or a long-term project, you're looking at the short-term impact retrofit. So you've got a building that should be renovated now or yesterday substantially. The example I see is the indoor ice rinks. A lot of them are more than 20 years old. They need major renos to be able to maintain the level of service to the population. And this is not something that can be done over 20 years. It'll be done immediately to be able to continue to operate. Another example, churches. A lot of community inherit churches within their municipalities, and they have to choose what they're going to do with these buildings. Some of them turn into cultural centers, libraries, but those are old buildings that were not very well maintained, that still work with combustible fuel. So what we want to see in an impact project is that your renovations will reduce at least 30% emissions compared to baseline emissions. This is fairly easily done because by targeting certain measures that are particularly efficient, we can attain that goal. So that's your first option, a short term of the impact retrofit. Second type of project. The second one is to the renovations with longer term optic. And this is where the funding goes hand in hand with the feasibility study that we alluded to a little earlier. So what we invite you to do is to avail yourselves of the subsidy for the feasibility and the sequence of investments on one or several buildings and to realize these different stages. It's very interesting because what we propose is that if you're interested in this long-term uh, goal, you can come and see us for funding at each stage of the process. The advantage of doing it this way is that if there's an impact project tomorrow morning, you'll you'll be limited to the ceiling of $5 million. If you have a longer term perspective, you'll be able to see us for each stage of your project, year one, year two, year three, and the ceiling will be a 5 million for each of the stages. So you've got the potential to get a lot more by going a long-term process. So it depends of your needs and of your will to integrate yourselves in a process that is more sequential. But the two options are there for you. And I'd be happy to discuss this with you to see what corresponds to your needs today. Perhaps the next one, please. So you've been with us for the last 45 minutes. We've guided you through this pathway to reduce the GHGs and the operation costs associated and to improve the comfort of the members of your community who use these buildings. So we start by understanding the output to use the data to optimize the systems that are existing and to use the renovation the options, short, medium, and long term, and to implement these capital upgrades. Next one. So you've got the summary here of the different amounts that are available to you. We've got subsidy, the grants grant for the analysis and the follow-up of the data to the recommissioning, a grant for the study. And when we're in the work, we can be a major partner in the financing of the renos with the amounts of up to $5 million. So we're leaving you today with the idea that we've got several resources. Yes, we offer funding. We've got webinar and training such as the one we've offered you today, but we've got a library of retrofits with pathways, with tools that are very practical, charts, Excel sheets that you can integrate in your everyday work that will simplify and open the horizons and in your municipality on how to get small gains as far as aiming for net zero. I invite you to consult the resource library. I think my colleagues will put it in the chat. We talk about our guide that was our planning, the pathway for community building. So documents that they can be very interesting to set the table for your conversations and everybody put everybody on the same wavelength regarding the elements that can be broached. The next one, please. We'll take your Q&As. If there are elements regarding your municipality If you'd like to look at other, please go ahead.
Merci, Émilie.
Thank you, Emily.
Vous avez dit on va maintenant à notre période de questions-réponses. Pour commencer,
Et
moi j'ai une question pour
to
les deux.
start, I've got a question for both of you.
Je me demande quels les problèmes vous
What are
rencontrez
the
que
problems
les
that
municipalités
you've had,
au
that the
moment
municipalities meet
à l'aube de
at
leur réduction
during this pathway in reduction of GHGs, and how do they surmount these obstacles?
Excusez-moi, moi de mon côté, ça l'a coupé juste un petit peu.
I'm
On cherche à
sorry.
identifier les problèmes
We
d'exécution, mais
tried to
je pense que
identify
ça
the
a été
problems.
compris.
I didn't quite understand.
Merci. Alors, c'est quoi les
So,
problèmes courants que les
what are the
municipalités
most common
rencontrent
problems that
à
the
cause
municipalities
leur parcours
encounter
de réduction de gaz à
in
effet de
the
serre dans les
pathway to
bâtiments
reduction of
communautaires?
GHGs in these community
En fait,
buildings?
ça serait le fun d'entendre nos
Well,
participants sur la
it
question.
would
J'ai
be
l'impression
great
que
to
les
hear
gens
our
sont probablement mieux que
participants.
nous. Donc,
They
si
probably
ça
know
pourrait
much better
ressortir un
than
exemple, je vous invite
if
vraiment
any one of you has
à
an
le partager.
example. I'd like you
Moi,
to
c'est
open
sûr,
up your mic. What I'm told
en plus de
often,
l'opportunité
because in my
d'avancer sur des
everyday
initiatives
work,
indépendantes,
I
c'est
I
d'avancer
explore
avec
different
la première approche.
possibilities.
C'est
With
quoi la
the
volonté?
first
Si tout le monde
obstacle
veut
is
avoir
not
cette
the will.
flexibilité dans le
Everybody
processus de
wants to get
réduction de gaz à
involved
effet de serre,
to
je
reduce
devrais par
GHGs,
où
but
commencer?
where does
C'est
one
quoi la première
start?
étape?
What is the first
Quels sont
stage?
les gens qui l'ont déjà fait? Est-ce qu'on
The
peut se baser
people
sur
who've done
certains
it
exemples?
before, can we
Est-ce que
rest
les
on some
projets existent
examples? Are there
aujourd'hui? Il y a des
guides?
bibliothèques de ressources
That's
parce que
why
je
I
pense que
talked to the
200
resource
personnes,
library.
je pense qu'il y
It
a
can
encore
be
des personnes dans les
intimidating,
municipalités qui n'ont pas
especially for the
nécessairement des
smaller
besoins de
municipalities
transition
who
climatique.
don't have such a
Ça peut sembler
climatic
évident, mais
transition
honnêtement, ça fait une
department
grosse
to
différence.
have a starting
Plusieurs
block. That makes
municipalités
a
le
difference.
représentent
Several
en fait.
municipalities, we've
Donc, ça
got
nous permet aussi
100
de voir
participants.
tout ce qui est possible au niveau de l'entraide,
Is
au
it
niveau des
possible
possibilités. Je pense que ça
to,
peut faire
I think
une grosse différence.
this would be a
Je passe
great,
la balle maintenant.
make a
Si
big
on a quelqu'un dans la
difference
salle qui voudrait
if
aller plus
uh,
loin, ça serait
if
très
you
intéressant.
want to explore this resource library. It gives you a
Oui,
guide
en
on how to
demandant
proceed.
quelqu'un
In the meantime,
à poser
says
aux questions ou
Jonathan,
de répondre
or
aux
to
questions, Emma,
to
je pourrais aussi dire que
I could
parce
say
que je
that
suis un agent de
as
projet
far
de développement
as a
d'équipes et
project
de
agent,
capacité, je dirais que
I would say that
comme Amélie a dit, c'est pas vraiment la volonté, mais c'est aussi
it's not the willpower that's missing,
leur capacité
it's the capacity
d'entreprendre ces projets
to
et
undertake
leurs
such
compétences, en
projects
fait.
and their
On travaille
skills.
souvent avec les
We often
municipalités
work
très
with
petites ou des
municipalities.
municipalités de moyenne taille
They've got
qui n'ont pas
very few
nécessairement
means.
l'expertise.
They don't necessarily have the
Peut-être une équipe
expertise. It may be
le département de récréation qui
it
entreprend ces
may
projets-là.
be
Ils n'ont pas nécessairement les
uh,
compétences en
they don't
aérogénie ou
necessarily
aussi
they don't have
en
the
climat et tout ça.
engineering or
Je pense que c'est
climate
vraiment un des
knowledge.
enjeux.
I think this is
Et
one of the
au,
stakes
au
that
FME, on offre beaucoup
and
de soutien,
we
beaucoup
offer a lot of
comme
support in
vous
that
auriez dit, les
department.
guides municipaux, on a un
With
service
we've
conseil
got a guide and
municipal qui
we've
va
got
gérer ça,
a
qui travaille
we've
sur ce
also
côté.
got
On
a
travaille
counts.
principalement
We give some
dans une manière très proche avec les
expertise.
municipalités qui ont
We work very closely with the
des compétences. On
municipalities
leur
who
met
need
en
to
lien avec des experts
expand
externes.
their
Donc, c'est
capacities.
vraiment gratuit.
And this is a
Alors,
free
ça aide vraiment
service
beaucoup
with counselors, with
comment dire, bridge the gap entre
advisors
leurs compétences et
that
leurs
can
besoins.
bridge the gap between their needs and their abilities.
Merci, Jonathan.
Thank you,
Une autre question
Jonathan.
de mon côté. Je
Another question
me
over
demande,
here. I was wondering
en ce qui concerne la planification à long terme des
regarding
réductions de gaz
long-term
à effet de serre,
planning of
pouvez-vous
GHGs.
expliquer un peu
Could
plus
you
en détail
explain
ce
in
que vous
detail
entendez
what
par une
you
séquence d'amélioration
mean
visant à
by a
planifier
sequence
des
of
réductions
improvements
importantes
that
de
could
GHG
lead
au Québec?
to important reduction in GHGs? I can give it a try, says Emily. I think we've given a good example. The question is interesting. To go more into detail is a challenge because every pathway will be different. It will be a per case scenario. We have to remember that what we want to maximize is the investments that they be done at the right moment and to the greatest impact on the energy efficiency. And to plan this long term, it allows you to increase everything that you're doing. You'll have to change certain equipments, like it or not, one way or the other. But if you plan it ahead, you'll be able to go with the best strategy for this replacement. I wouldn't go more into detail in the pathway because it will be very different from one municipality to the next. But the key to the success is to explore the scenarios and what fits best. 3 scenarios. So we invest in 5 years. We do a major uphaul. So there are advantages to being very aggressive, and there are also advantages to do it step by step, baby step, bit by baby step, perhaps over 20 years. Perhaps your third scenario is over 7 years because your goal is the year 2030. So to go according to your needs and to find someone who supports you, who understand the challenges of your specific municipality. That's what I would add. Jonathan, if you have anything else to add. There are other elements, but invite the participant to look in the case studies. It'll give you a lot of ideas what other municipalities did, and there's an array. It is unique to every municipality. One will be very different from another according to the reality of the municipality. Sometimes we don't know exactly what are our opportunities, what the options are. So the case studies will certainly inspire you what's been done elsewhere in our partnerships so far.